We are ending a series today, so we're kind of capping off and finishing a conversation that we're calling First Things First, Prioritize Your Life. And we really are just coming from this aspect of we believe that God has something to say about the priorities in our life in terms of what we place first in our life and how important they are, because we believe that they matter to the degree that they actually set a trajectory. They actually set a course and direction for us. No matter how no matter what we state our purpose is, our priorities really determine that. That's really the statement we've been using this whole time. Our priorities determine our purpose. How many have gotten this in their heads so far? We said it every week, right? Let's say it one more time just to get it really in there, right? Let's read it. Our priorities determine our purpose. Just say it one more time. Our priorities determine our purpose, right? They really do, no matter what it is you'd like to say on the bottom of your emails or, in a tweet once a week, it's fine. But the reality is how you live your life, in terms of even some of the things we're going to talk about today, how you live and what you place first in your life, they really determine the kind of life you're living, the point of your life, the 70, 80 years you might have on this earth. They really do determine it. And so we decided to talk about that from the standpoint of two areas. One was our lives from a standpoint of time. Why? Because time is life. Life is time. We looked at what Moses had to say in terms of Psalm 90, where he said, hey, God, teach us to number our days, right? Teach us to help us with priorities, to make good decisions. Why? So that we'll have a heart of wisdom. So we'll continue to make good decisions. We'll actually live better lives in terms of wisdom. We'll actually make better choices. And we use this example for time. Hopefully you've seen this example before in terms of businesses and priority classes where, you try to add things. Because that's the problem with time, is there's always not enough time, right? Not enough time. We add things and add things and add things instead of understanding priorities, so that we can't fit everything in until we put the big rocks in first, then the little rocks, and then the little rocks, and we're actually able to get it all in. That's what we talked about the first week. And just in this idea of how do we get it all to fit? Well, it has to do with our priorities. And so Jesus speaks into this by saying, hey, look, seek first the kingdom, right? Seek first God, seek first His mission, His kingdom, and everything else will be added. Everything else can fit. Everything else in there, even the things that you enjoy about life, will be a part of this. There's no reason to worry or have anxiety or fear of just trying to add everything to your life, all right? And so we asked the question, what or who do we seek first? That was really kind of the end of the first week. The second week we chose to talk about money, right? And this was not, sometimes we talk about money, and right now if you're visiting, you're like, oh man, we visited on the right day because last week they talked about money. I can feel the tension in the room. All right. No, last week wasn't really about that kind of talk in terms of giving and all that kind of thing. We talked about how God views money, okay, from the standpoint of a parable that Jesus talked about, which was a very strange parable. Most people don't read it because they can't really understand it. But they try to talk about the fact that this is what money is. It wasn't so much about who you are or who I am or what we do. It has to do with money. Money really is a tool. But we are given a certain amount of resources in our life as a tool to leverage, to be used according to the priorities that we place in our life, all right? It's a test, whether we're responsible with the tool He's already given us, whether we're responsible with what He's already placed with us. It's a test of our faith. It's a test of our priorities to use it in the right direction, all right? And depending on how we use it and what we use it with will depend on, kind of the outcome and whether we have any more to use in the right direction. And so it's a tool, it's a test. It's really how God sees money. And then He ended that parable with that understanding that, look, you can't serve God and money. You're going to be a slave to one or the other. You're going to serve one and hate the other. And so He ended it with that aspect of, we ended it with at least the question, what are we doing with what we've been given? And that can apply to really both of these things, money and time. What are we doing with what we've been given? We all have a little bit of time, right? We all have a little bit of resources that we have. We don't feel like either one of them has much margin, because that's just the way we North Americans live, right? But we have this desire. If you're a Christian, this is really kind of a message to Christians today. If you're not a Christian today, or you're just kind of checking things out, you can follow everything we're going to talk about today, as with most things that Jesus taught. You can follow what He said and actually still live a better life. But I'm speaking mainly, most of the passages today are mainly to Christians that say, hey, we got a little bit of time, a little bit of resources. What are we doing with them? And how can we practically use them in a way that gives us, and really the kind of the theme of the day is maximum impact. How can we use the little bit we have to have a maximum impact? Here's what I know. When I speak with most folks, here's what I know. No one strives to be average, right? No one strives for kind of complacency. No one strives for kind of the medium bar, right? The middle bar. Nobody watches the Olympics and then goes to the pool and just lays down flat and swims. Everybody will watch the Olympics. How many of you guys watch the swimming, right? Next time you're at the pool, you're rubbing your arms a little bit, you're shaking it off a little bit. You're like, oh. And I try to do that backstroke. My body doesn't even turn that way. It just doesn't work, right? Nobody does that. Everyone has something in them, and I'm saying this from a standpoint of how God wired you, to want to contribute, to want to have an impact with what you have, the little bit that you have. You want to have an impact that's more than you. And the only reason we've settled for average, the only reason we've settled for less, the only reason we've settled for complacency is usually out of fear. But it's the wrong kind of fear. It's a misplaced fear and trust in our stuff. Now, one of the authors I really enjoy, his name is Bob Goff. He wrote a book called Love Does, and he's a great speaker. Yes, you guys are all Bob Goff fans. And this is on his website. I love this quote. It's in my office. It says, "I used to be afraid of failing at something that really mattered to me, but now I'm more afraid of succeeding at things that don't matter." Right? And this is a wonderful quote. He said, look, I also experienced in my life where I was just afraid to risk things. I was afraid to take the little bit of time and the little bit of resources I had and use them. I was afraid of failing at those things. And now he said, but now I'm much more afraid. I'm really much more fearful of actually succeeding at the things that don't matter. At things. And this is where Bob would say, look, don't waste your time on things that don't create any type of impact in your life. Don't squander your resources that you've been given, the thing that you've been given to steward. Don't do it. Don't squander them and just be so wasteful that it doesn't make an impact beyond you ever in your life. Because ultimately in you is wired this desire to have a greater impact, to have maximum impact. And so really to make it easy, I use three phrases often. This is something that I kind of put together through different things. I put it together a couple of years ago, and I've used this a lot. You'll see it on social media if you follow me. I just use these phrases a lot, especially when it comes to what does it look like for someone who's following God, having a relationship with Christ, trying to live this life as a disciple. What does it look like for us to be able to have, practically, do some things to have an impact in our life? And here's the three things. Invest intentionally, give generously, and to love lavishly. All right? There's an invest, give, love, which is a big part of a lot of things we talk about, but really these other, these adjectives, if you will, these things that kind of amplify those words. We want to invest, not just invest, we want to invest intentionally. We want to give, but not just give. I think everybody can give. We want to give generously and understand generosity. We want to love, but we want to love lavishly, all right? So this is this idea of maximum impact. So today what I want to do, again, just make it as practical as possible. I want to talk about both of these elements in terms of the part they play and the priorities and the purpose of our life. And I want to talk about them from the standpoint of what does it look like to invest intentionally? What does it look like to give generously? And what does it look like to love lavishly, practically in our lives, all right? Now, let's go to the first one. First one is invest intentionally. I'll spend a little bit more time on this because it applies to both time and money. I'm going to talk about it more from the standpoint of time. But this one, a lot of rules kind of apply to this in terms of understanding what value just even small deposits of time, small intentional investments can make in your life. So here's that aspect of just intentional investment. There is a cumulative value over time investing intentionally to what or who is first in your priorities, right? There is something about this cumulative value. It adds up and creates a foundation and adds up some more and creates a foundation and adds up some more. There's just something cumulative about all the things that really kind of hit the priorities in your life if it's pointed in the right direction that really has this incredible big payoff at the end of the day, right? Now, this is the one that most people don't want to talk about, but it's like fitness, right? Everybody doesn't want to talk about that. We're going to talk about it for a second. All right, fitness or health, right? There is something where people say, look, if you just walk 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week, it can just, drastically just change your health, change your perspective. It can do so much for you. Just do a little bit, right? A little bit of time, intentionally invest 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week. And you're like, yes, I've heard that. No, I'm not going to do that, right? Right? But there is cumulative value to doing those things, right? It could be anything. It could be to your kids, right? Instead of that one vacation a year or 2 vacations a year, that you try to, kind of cram all your quality time with your kids and, buy their affection with gifts and fun and entertainment, which the kids enjoy. But, they'd rather have those small investments of time, right? There's a small investment of time that really create the bond between your kid and you as a parent. It's those times, this is my life. It's those times when my son all he wants to talk about is this stupid game that I could give a rip about, right? And it's all I can do for 3 minutes to entertain a conversation that I care nothing about, and yet it's all he wants to talk about. And so I only give him 3 minutes. That's just the rule of my house. No, I give him as long as I can to entertain those conversations. Why? Because I know there's cumulative value in those conversations to continue to grow in a relationship with my son. Same is true with my daughter. Same is true now with even my youngest daughter. Those small investments of time where she can see me and we can connect. There's a bigger payoff when you just do those small intentional investments of time, right? Now, why do we ignore this? Because this is true of our spiritual life. This is true of reading the Bible. It's true of so many things that could be priorities for us. Why is it a problem? Why do we ignore it most of the time? And here's the 2 reasons I believe we ignore it. There is no immediate benefit to any single investment of time, any small single investment of time. There's no immediate benefit, right? Nobody's going to get all jacked up and work out one day for an hour, and the next day somebody look at you and you go, wow, you look amazing, right? You're not going to wake up and pray and read just a little bit of the scriptures, and somebody's going to come to you at lunch and be like, you are so full of wisdom all of a sudden, right? The problem that we have is that it's so easy to ignore and procrastinate because there's no immediate usual benefit to a small little investment of time intentionally, right? But here's the other problem. There's also no immediate consequence to ignoring any single investment of time, right? There's no immediate consequences when you just that one time work a little bit later, right? You work a little bit later instead of coming home for dinner. There's no immediate consequences to that one time as a kid you didn't study that one night. It's not going to drop your grade point average on that one night you didn't study. There's no immediate consequences to the fact that I chose to eat, chocolate cake last night instead of some sort of wheat thing with grains. Like I did, you know what I'm saying? Like there's no immediate consequence to sort of ignoring those things and doing something else. So because of those 2 things, it's oftentimes hard. It's hard for us to see the cumulative value of what it looks like to intentionally invest our time, intentionally invest our resources in the right things, in the things that are the priority, because it really pays off in the long run. It pays off. When you come home and you engage your spouse first in conversation before you check the mail or check what's going on or check, before you check out, there's a long-term benefit in all of those things. And the same is true, again, in our spiritual lives. However, I want to also say this. Neglect is also cumulative as well, right? Ignoring the things we should be doing, ignoring the things that do have cumulative value in terms of our priorities, when we neglect them, when we ignore them, they also have a cumulative effect. You may not, if you're under 40, you may not be experiencing this all that much in your life, but you may be seeing it in your parents, right? You may be seeing the fact that they've ignored their health for years. And when the problem is neglect, there is a breaking point. There is a stopping point. There's this time when something can't be fixed anymore. That 5 and 10 years of, ignoring a spouse or ignoring their emotions or that can cause irreparable emotional damage that ultimately all the counseling in the world is not going to fix for you. Because there is a cumulative effort to ignoring things and the negative side of that as well. And that's a big part of this pie, guys. It's just this idea of do not waste what you've been given, this small amount of time, these small resources you have. Understand the value of intentionally investing. Now, here's the last thing, just to, in terms of a warning. There is zero cumulative value in those random investments we opt for instead of the things that matter. Right? I can't take, instead of getting up in the morning and working out, I can't take all the things that I chose to do, right? The sleeping in a couple extra hours, being awake longer that night before, watching a movie or, surfing online or getting up early to go coffee with a friend. I can't take all of those things and add it up and be in amazingly physical shape, right? I can't, there's no value in all the random things I chose to do instead of the thing that I should have done. And the same is true spiritually. The same is true for your walk with Christ. Same is true with your money. Right? You cannot take all the random things you chose to do with the funds you've been given and then retire, right? And just easy peasy, right? Retire on the lake somewhere. You might be on the lake somewhere living in a canoe or my kayak you may have to borrow one day. I don't know. But you can't take, there's a zero-sum value in terms of payoff with all the little random things that we choose to do instead. So time is a big deal. Matter of fact, Paul says it this way to his letter to the church in Ephesus. After he's given, this is in the 5th chapter, it's after he's given a ton of instruction. He's given a ton of just pouring his heart out in terms of the way you live. And then he says this, hey, be careful then how you live, the decisions you make, the things you place in terms of priority. Not as unwise, but wise. Making the most of every opportunity because the days are evil. Leave that verse up for me. Making the most of every opportunity is a very big phrase because in kind of the language that he's using, it's kind of almost an accounting term. It really is this idea of making the most of our opportunities, like redeem the time, right? Redeem the time for something of equal or greater value. Don't waste it. Don't let it just be so random. And this is where I have to come, this is where he ends with the days are evil. I know that sounds kind of weird for him to say that, but here's what it means. It basically means that, look, if you picture a stream, how many went tubing? I think only teenagers and drunk people actually tube anymore. So, you know tubing, right? When you get in the tube and you just float down the river, right? Imagine this. It's really this understanding that, look, the days are evil, meaning that your current culture, this is Paul talking to the church of Ephesus and even us today. The current culture is never going to drift you towards the things that matter. You're not going to drift towards the things that are important. You're not going to just drift along. If you do not plant your feet and choose a direction, if you do not intentionally make that choice, you do not just wake up after zoning out and realize, oh, I ran 3 miles. Isn't that amazing, right? I wasn't even paying attention, and there I was building low-income housing. I just didn't even know I could do that. No one does that. No one drifts towards the things that matter. No one drifts towards the things that are important. Nobody drifts towards the priorities that they want to be priorities. The days are evil is that, look, if you just pick your feet up and you're not paying attention, you're not investing intentionally, you will drift towards what everything else in culture tells you is important. So he says, therefore, do not be foolish, right? That's the Bible definition of I read that you should do this, but I didn't do it. I know that you're supposed to, I know there's principles, but I didn't do it. Don't be foolish. Don't act thoughtlessly. But understand what the Lord's will is. Why does he say it that way? He says it because there is a purpose for your life. There's a plan for your life. There's a unique thumbprint on your life, not just how you were made, but the purpose he has for you. What are you doing with what you've been given? How does it align with making it a priority? Because you're choosing to invest intentionally. And I'll just give a couple quick examples in terms of even church world. We tell people all the time that we had a discovering journey last week with a bunch of new folks and families, that our journey was so nice to meet everybody, but last week we kind of told them. We said, listen, we have to tell you, you have to take a step. You have to intentionally invest in time, a step at our church, and we're going to give you 3 steps to take, but you have to do at least one of them, and here's why. If you do not do it, it doesn't matter, because everybody who comes and visits our church and usually, ends up discovering journey, they haven't been here long enough for me to offend, or Donnie to offend, really, or Chris the music's too loud, or whatever, whatever it may be. We haven't been here long enough to rush anybody off, or realize we're stacking your children in the second service, like double high, to get them in the room. Like, they don't know that yet. They love everything about Journey. They're visiting. They are enjoying it. And we just say, look, that's great. We know you love it. That's great. Here's the deal. You have to you have to take a step and intentionally invest some time. You got to volunteer, or you have to serve outside this church. Find something. Volunteer in here. Find ways to serve in this and serve in that and serve. Volunteer. Take a step. Take time to invest in it. Go on a global outreach trip. Partner with a Hope Lake Norman project. It doesn't matter. Serve outside the walls of this church. You got to take a step. You got to take a step towards community in some way. That's why we have group link happening after the second service. Group links happening in the little cafe area. You have to take a step, and it has to be intentional. Why? Because think about groups. Anything you add to your calendar, if your calendar's like mine, it's an intentional thing. You have to invest time. You have to sacrifice other things in order to make that happen, that 2 hours in the week to get together with a group of people. That is an intentional investment. But I'm telling you, the payoff of that intentional investment is huge in your life. When I talk to marriages that are suffering, marriages that are going through conflict and trouble, usually within the first about 10 or 15 minutes, I can discover usually that there is not a history in their life where they have been doing life with other like-minded Christian people. Okay, like-minded is important. Like-minded Christians. They don't have any history of doing community with those people. They've been on their own and in isolation for too long. And I talk about some of the marriage issues that they have, and I'm just telling you that. Now, the reason I say that is now sometimes they joined a group like 6 months ago, and Matt, you said it was going to change my life, and you're a liar because it didn't change anything, right? And I'm just like, look, what you've been neglecting for 10 years cannot be fixed in 6 months of doing life with people in small group. So do not take that as a prescription, okay? I say the same thing for counselors as well. Don't assume it's going to be fixed in 2 meetings. I'm saying that when you have a history, like my wife and I have been married for 21 years. 21 years. And I'm convinced that there's a lot of ways that I feel like God's had his hand on our marriage, but I'm convinced one of the reasons that we still work on our relationship, okay, the reason we still want to work on our relationship, the still reason that we will care about being good parents to our growing kids is because we have a history. We have a history of it. It used to be called Sunday school. Anybody remember Sunday school groups? Yeah, we have a history of Sunday school groups and life groups and small groups where we have chosen to do life with, other like-minded Christians who are also trying to love their wife and spouse and better, and who are also trying to be better parents. We feel like that's one of the reasons, I'm telling you, that's one of the reasons I feel like we care about those things today. Because we have a history of making it a priority to intentionally invest that time in doing life in those circles where we know it's going to make a difference in us. Cumulative value. Every week, every other week meeting, having those conversations, doing life in the long run pays off. So you take those steps. And I don't know what your step needs to be. I'm just saying that. Maybe it is fitness and health. Maybe God's been talking to you about that. Maybe it's spiritually. Maybe it's doing your devotions. I don't know what step you need to take. I'm telling you from a practical standpoint, if you want to change your priorities and align it with what you say you believe, you have to start investing intentionally your time. You have to take a step and do that. I don't know what it will be for you. There's opportunities. I said we have opportunities all the time to help you as a church, but it's not our responsibility. It's yours. It's your life. It's your time. We cannot tell you what to do. Just give you opportunities. Take a step. You can take a step today at Group Link. Same goes with giving generously, right? Give generously. Now you can use this in terms of both time and money, because the reality is true. We're stingy with both. Right, because our time, we're not prioritizing our time right, so we're just adding and adding and adding, and it can't fit, and it can't fit, and it can't fit. So oftentimes we're not even able to give generously of ourselves and our time to people in need. But the same is also true with no margin in terms of our finances and what we've been given, in terms of the tools we've been given. We have to give generously. And I always say this as well in terms of just the cumulative nature of giving is there. But here's what really happens with giving. There's actually, beyond cumulative value, there is actually compounding interest over time, right? In giving generously to what or who is first in your priorities. There's a compounding interest. And scripturally speaking, I'm specifically talking about money, and we're specifically talking to Christians, okay? The reality is that God's economy is not like ours. I cannot tell you, other than give you the undeniable example of my life, that most of the time the Excel spreadsheet just doesn't work right, okay? It's broken, okay? I look at the spreadsheet, it doesn't look like we should be able to, but if we have our priorities right and we're intentionally investing and we're giving generously because we've pre-decided to give generously, God works it out. I don't know how else to explain that other than say it just does, and Excel's mysteriously broken most of the time, right? But whenever I try to manage it myself, whenever I try to take what we have and God doesn't come first, He usually comes last, it's always a problem. It never seems to add up and it never seems to work right. That's just my personal testimony to that. Now, I don't really believe, again, I believe more in generosity is not the same as giving. Giving is something that everybody can do. I can bring up a kid up here and tell you his sad story and make him look really thin and play some music behind you, and you would give. You know what I'm saying? Like, everybody knows what giving is when there's a need, and everybody knows what giving is when there's a challenge. I'm talking about generosity. I'm talking about giving generously, meaning you've already decided to do so. It's pre-decided. Generous people are never guilted. Did you know that? Generous people don't have to worry about guilt because they've already decided what they're giving to. They've already decided what the percentage they're giving. They've already decided where it's going. They've already decided all those things. And God may bring an interruption. They go, that's great. I think that's something God wants me to do. But generous people aren't swayed. And what happens is that not just cumulative value, but there's compounding interest. God does something with your money further faster when you give it away, especially in terms of it aligns with the priorities in your life and the purpose that He has for you. He's able to take it and go further faster. It's just the way it works. It's one of the reasons we as a church also believe that in terms of our church. Now, here's how Paul addresses this with the Corinthians. He is talking very specifically about giving, especially when he came to people in church, all right? So I just want you to read this. Now I want you to know, dear brothers and sisters, what God in his kindness has done through the churches in Macedonia. This is him talking to the church in Corinth. The churches in Macedonia, they're being tested by many troubles. Circumstances are hard, and they are very poor. But they are also filled with abundant joy, which has overflowed in rich generosity. For I can testify that they gave not only what they could afford, but far more. And they did it of their own free will. This is not something they were coerced to do or manipulated to do. This is something that they chose to do. They chose to do this. And he's saying, look, I'm letting you know what the Macedonians are doing because their circumstances are very hard. Corinth church, I'm letting you know this for a reason. And then I love this explanation. He goes down to verse 7. I want you to see this. You excel in so many ways. This is him talking to the church in Corinth. In your faith, in your gifted speakers, in your knowledge, in your passion or enthusiasm, and in your love from us, because they're excelling in the fact that Paul and his crew, they just pouring out their love back to the Corinthians. He says, I want you to excel also in this generous or gracious act of giving. I want you to excel in that gracious act of giving. I am not commanding you to do this, but I'm testing how genuine your love is by comparing you with the eagerness of other churches. He just puts it out there. He says, look, I'm not going to command you to do it, but I'm telling you what's happening in the life of other people. I'm telling you what's happening in the life of other churches, and you guys excel in everything except this area. This is one of those things where all of a sudden Paul says, yeah, I know, you've got great speakers, you've got incredible passion, you've got great enthusiasm, you've got incredible knowledge. But I want you also to excel in this area that aligns with your priorities, in which at least you state your priorities to be. And then later on he says this, you should finish what you started. Let the eagerness you showed in the beginning be matched now by your giving. Give in proportion to what you have. Whatever you give is acceptable if you give it eagerly. And give according to what you have, not what you don't have. Very simple. This is one of those things where what Paul specifically talks about, the tool we've been given, the test we've been given with the resources that we have. And it doesn't matter. We talked about this last week. It doesn't matter how much money you have and don't have. Giving and generosity is not a money issue. It's a heart issue. That's what Jesus said it was. You can't serve both God and money. And he tells the Pharisees, he says, look, you're the ones who can justify anything. And it's true. We can justify anything. He says, but God knows your hearts. Generosity is a heart issue, not a money issue. I have more fake $1,000 bills than any of you people do, right? I do. But it's not a money issue. It's a heart issue. So he says, look, give what you have. Leverage the tool you've been given to give proportionally. And then we use that word a lot, but we use that, we use 3 Ps here when we talk about giving and understanding what giving looks like, because we talk about, make it a priority. Again, this is talking about teaching generosity, not necessarily giving, because we all have random acts of giving. But, generosity really does, make it a priority. It comes out first. It's the first thing you deal with when it comes to your stuff. Make it a percentage, so you don't have to argue all the time with God about whether it should be this and should be that. The Old Testament says it's 10%, and Jesus says it's all of it. So you choose which one's better for you. You know what I'm saying? Choose a percentage. Okay, doesn't need to be. Just choose one. Choose a percentage, and then it says, make it progressive. Like challenge yourself. Make it grow. My wife and I, we struggled with that because I was raised in that 10%, and just even a few years ago, we had kind of always done that, and it was never, we had good times and bad times, but we were challenged to make it progressive. We actually ended up trying to double it because we had never really challenged ourselves to do much more. And that was an incredible time, again, where the Excel spreadsheet didn't work. We went a couple years with our commitment during one, and God just figured it out. We were never wanting in those 2 years. It was amazing. So the idea is those 3 Ps just kind of help us understand. This is what in proportion to giving looks like. He says, I'm not commanding you to do it. I, as a pastor, I'm never worried about Journey Church. Journey Church has had amazing times of blessing. We've had really thin times where we've let go of staff and restructured things in order to make it work with what we had coming in. I am never worried about this church, ever. This is a message for you, and it's between you and God. That's just all there is to it. Paul says, I'm not commanding you. I never command you. We just simply say, look, if you want what's best for you, if you want to be able to leverage all the things that God has given you and to do everything that he knows you can do with what he's given you, you have got to put him first. You've got to let him be first and actually align with, in terms of your giving, generously. And listen, sometimes, I know we talk about tithing is like a little bit every time you get, that kind of thing. That's fine. But if money has a hold of you, If you already recognize it from leaving last week, money's just got a grip on me. I'm a slave to money. Listen, you need to write a check that will make you cry, okay? I'm just saying you need to put to death that idol. You need to put to death the thing that has you a slave to it. Write a check that'll make you cry. We'll all cry with you. It's fine, you know? And I say this, and my leaders don't always like what I say, but if you can't give your money here for whatever reason, look, there's just something about Journey, you're still investigating or whatever. I don't know what the reason would be, but if you can't give your money here, then please leave, okay? Leave and go somewhere else that you can. Go somewhere where you can pour your heart out, give your time, give your resources, and you can actually begin to tithe and give because it's all about what God has for you. I'm not worried about this church at all. Go somewhere else. Give it somewhere else. That's why we always have partnerships that we're talking about. We raise money for Hope Lake Norman. One of the greatest things that I love about our church is how much money we keep trying to give away, right? Because I love, listen, I think God does so much with your tithes and offerings in our church in terms of the fruit of the ministry we have. I love what we're able to do as a church. But the reality is, money still goes further, faster overseas, right? Even in West Virginia, when we have a partnership, the tools we're able to buy for them that they just can't afford, in those big chunks, 3,000, 4,000, 6,000, we are able to buy tools for them to allow them to do even more jobs, more projects, and they are able to do it faster and with the right tools. Right? Same thing goes with Peru. Peru has their big dinner coming up this fall. Sunday Fun Day, all the profits go to Recovering Hope for Peru. There's just so much we're able to do. It's just $30,000, right, in terms of a year, able to put full-time people at the shelter doing incredible work. We were a witness to that this year of just how incredible, even just a psychologist is right now, at really breathing health into these girls who have tragic stories. You know, our global outreach is raising, I think it's $8,100 for our partnership in Kenya, right? And listen, that $8,100, that's $8,000. It provides, give me the numbers again. It provides 3 classrooms with everything, right? All the food, all the supplies, the teacher salaries, and the thing. Like, you can't do that for $8,000. I can't even bribe a teacher for $8,000 here. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't even know if I could buy a kid's grade. But we're able to do that there. Why? Because it goes further, faster there. That's why we're always having those partnerships. That's why we're giving the money away. That's why, because when we do things that align with our priorities and we take those steps and give generously, God just always does the compounding interest thing that builds on itself and does more and multiplies more than we could ever possibly do. That's why we do it, because we get to be a part of that. Last thing is love lavishly, right? Love lavishly. Isn't that last? Am I there? Yeah, there we go. Love lavishly. All right? Go to the statement. There's a growing awareness over time in loving lavishly those whom you place first in your priorities. It could be your spouse. It could be your kids. It could be in our particular conversation here, just in terms of God. There's just an over time growing awareness, growing understanding of that love when you love lavishly over time the priorities in your life. How many, listen, just, you could be honest about it. How many of you feel like you've experienced someone in your life at some point in your life just pouring out their love in a lavish way on you? How many feel like you've ever experienced that, right? It's amazing. And I don't know what you picture when you picture lavishly. Like, I picture like an Egyptian prince with like feeding me grapes and like, people would follow me with fans all the time and I would never sweat. That to me would be a lavish show of love for me. Right? And so I look at that and go, the loving lavishly is really what I feel like we're called to do because we were lavishly loved first by God. That's what John says when he says, look, we love others because God loved us first. But here's where it comes back to the priorities for us. Jesus is challenged by one of the teachers. One of the teachers of religious law, these are the Sadducees, they're kind of like the lawyers, was standing there listening to a debate, and he realized that Jesus had answered well. So he asked him, hey, out of all the commandments, this is 614 plus the 10, right? Out of all the commandments, which is the most important? Which one is first? First things first. Here's what Jesus says. The most important commandment is this. Listen, O Israel, the Lord our God is the one and only Lord. You must love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. It's really this whole being. And then he says this. This is because Jesus is allowed to do this. And the second one is equally important, which means the answer is 2 things, right? The answer is a tie. First thing is actually 2 things. Love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these. He would later on say, people know who you belong to by the way you love one another, right? They know who you belong to by the way you love one another. This is the challenge. This is the part for us that we look at and go, okay, I understand that we're called to love, but here's the problem. We experience, and I think we've experienced good things. Jason and I were even talking, Jason Thompson and I were talking yesterday. There were 3 people moving in Journey yesterday. Actually, I found out there's like 4 or 5, which is just really weird. Okay, there's a lot of people to move. People moving different areas, moving away, moving into different houses. And we had different people, and we were kind of noticing on the outside looking in that every single person that was moving had plenty of people showing up to help them move. Okay? That's people in life group, people in leadership teams, staff, other things. They had all people showing up to help them move. And I looked at that and I said, this really is a testament of people who get it, right? This is a testament of people who get it. I love it when people get it, because when they get the understanding of that's just a little thing. That's just a little intentional investment of time, right, on a Saturday, 3 or 4 hours, to show the love that we have for our brothers and sisters in Christ, to help them move some boxes and a couch. That's a little thing. But we see that again and again and again and again and again in the history of our church. And it's something that we look at and go, okay, that is what we want to continue, and we want to get even more, above and beyond, lavishly, especially with those who are not like us. Why? Because what we experience today in our culture is the neglect, if you will, the ignoring of that command. Because there has been a growing awareness of the church as love, but it is not because we are loving lavishly those who are not like us. It has been a growing awareness of the fact that we are more known for what we are against and for our misplaced hate of really other people that are not like us. That's what's known. But should that change? Should that be something, even in our churches, we continue to love this community, to bring hope to this community, to point people to the absolute hope of Christ, that we are able to lavish, okay, that's above and beyond what you might naturally do, lavishly love those who are not like us, love others as much as we love us. Before time, really that cumulative effort where it grows over time, that all of a sudden we will gain the influence again. We will gain that confidence again that, you know what, I may not agree with anything they say, but boy, they sure do know how to love people. That's what the church was meant to be known for. Well, I may not agree with their stance on Christ. I may not agree with where they believe about sin and not sin and whatever, but you know what? No one loves like them. That's what we were called to do, because it's a priority in our life. To invest intentionally, to give generously, to love lavishly. Remember, our priorities determine our purpose. The priorities we place, the steps we want to take, even today, are going to help dictate the purpose for the life we live. Let's just read these together. Invest intentionally, give generously, love lavishly. One more time, read it again. Invest intentionally, give generously, love lavishly. Just take a step. Take a step in any one of those things. Take a small step in all 3, and start asking that question. That same question we ended with last week. God, what am I doing with what you have given me? What am I doing with what I've been given? In terms of my little bit of time, my little bit of resources. God, I know that you can have really just this incredible impact through those, what I consider to be not that big a thing. If I would just invest it intentionally, and I would give generously, and I would learn what it looks like to love lavishly those who are not like me. And you will not be the same either when you start to do those things. Not only will it change how others view you, not only will it change, but you, and change your priorities, you yourself will begin to see a change in you when you take those steps. Let's stand together this morning. I want to close this out in prayer, but I just want to make this challenge loud and clear, all right? You need to take a step. You need to take a step. I don't know what it is for you. I cannot tell you. Every person's story in here is so different. But I can guarantee you, no matter how much you get it in one area or another, I feel this way, the same way Paul said, hey, you excel in this, and this, but this is what I also want you to excel in. At those of you that I know, I could probably say the same thing in prayer for you. God, they excel so well in giving of their time. They struggle because they're slave to money. God, they are so intentional about their money, but they are not using their time. They're so stingy with their time. God, I mean, even just those two things, I think in all of our lives, we can take a step somewhere, and we can see God do something incredible. That's my prayer this morning for everyone here. All right? So let's pray together. God, we just pray this morning that for that little nudge, that little Holy Spirit kind of, prompting this morning when I was either speaking about time or money or intentionally investing or giving generously or loving lavishly, God, you already prodded us. You already reminded us and spoke to us this morning about what it is that you want us to do individually. That's just how you work. May not be any single word that I've spoken, God, and that's okay. I'd rather everyone here hear what you have to say. And take that step, take that challenge, take that step to love that person in their life right now that they're finding it a hard time to love them lavishly and to pour it out the way you poured out your love for us. To give generously, to pre-decide that they want to make their money and their tools align with the purpose that they state as a priority in their life. It's going to hurt at the very beginning, God. It's going to be uncomfortable, but God, meet them there as they take that first step. And to intentionally invest their time, to really begin to understand that there really is there's just zero-sum value of all the random things we choose to do. We need to be more intentional at making the most of every opportunity. God, I'm so thankful that it's by your grace and your power that we are able to even accept a challenge like this to take a step. God, I pray today for all of those that are going to go over to GroupLink, all of those that are going to take that step to step into community, that God, that you would just be all over it, that you would just bless that time of connectivity, and that God, you'd be with every one of the group leaders and every one of the new groups that are starting, God, today, that all the right people would find the right group, and that God, you would connect those that are just desiring to take that simple step. I know that it will change their life, God. Meet them there as they do it. And in Jesus' name we pray all of this. Amen.